And let me just share my screen and welcome everybody to yet another webinar, live webinar with myself, Mel Ross. I am here to talk to you about all things humanizing transformation. Thank you for joining. I know that we're still, for a lot of people, in the holiday season vis-a-vis Easter. So many people will be watching me on playback, but that's all good. So welcome, either live here today with me or on playback. So here we are, we're talking about humanizing transformation. And what we're going to be talking about today is something really, really important. We're talking about the power of habit. Now, do you know what's interesting? Is that I often say to practitioners when I'm training practitioners in humanizing transformation and modern mindset theory, I say this, that mindset is the missing piece in a lot of transformational strategies. And habit is the missing technique in the design of our delivery mechanisms. So it's incredibly important, whether you're a change manager, whether you're in learning and development, whether you're a project or program manager, to understand the rudiments of habit work and to ensure that we include it in our delivery, because of what hopefully I'm going to be sharing with you today, which might be new, or indeed if it's familiar territory for you, then fantastic. Maybe we can have a wee bit of a conversation a little bit later. Just to let you know, these sessions are usually every other week. So we try to get 2 sessions in a month on the subject of humanizing transformation and modern mindset. We usually run for around about 30 minutes to 45 minutes to make sure that everybody's got a little bit of breathing space, whether it's evening time in Southern Hemisphere or ready to start the day here in the Northern Hemisphere. So we talk about a theme and then a little bit of Q&A. So the theme today, as I've mentioned, is the power of habit. And as you all know, I love starting with a quote. And instead of just one quote today, what I've got is I've got 3 quotes. And I think, you know, the reason that I've picked these 3 quotes is they all say something really interesting and something important for us all to grab hold of and anchor before we head into the depth of today's content subject. So the first one from Octavio Butler, you know, habit is more dependable than even something as great as inspiration. And that is incredibly important. Why? Because it's dependable. So really what this is saying is it's saying that habits give us sustainability. Habit work gives us sustainability. If you have got a project or program that you're working on that involves human beings, I question whether anybody is working on a project or program that doesn't involve human beings. But if you're working on a project or program that involves human beings shifting the way that they think or do or behave in a particular way because of a technology, because of a new product, whatever, the thing that you want is you want them to be able to sustain that change, to sustain that new behavior after your project and program has run out of budget and time. It's really important. So habit gives us sustainability. What's something else? Well, it is about our life. Our habits actually are who we are. If you think about it, really, who we are, our identity is made up of all of the millions of habits that come together to create who we are. And it's so incredibly important. It's not just what we do in terms of conscious thinking. And when you think about culture, if you're thinking about groups of people, a team or a department or an entire target audience for a product or service, you're talking about culturally the nuances around them. And what is culture? Culture is a collective identity of human beings. And what is collective identity of human beings? How many times have you heard people say, it's just the way we do things around here, that's the culture? What they're describing is habits. They're not describing anything else. They're describing habits. So really important for us to understand that. So again, just thinking about who we are is largely dependent on the habits that make up our identity. And then the final quote that I've got here from Tony Robbins, I like this one. I mean, I know it's probably a little bit off script for today's conversation because we're talking about projects and programs and habits, relevancy in there. But you know what? If you want to take control of who you are, your leadership, your professional development, your own pathway, your purpose in life, the way to do it is through the constancy of habit. There you go. 3 completely different quotes saying 3 completely different things about one thing, habits, super important. But of course, we really need to understand what a habit is. And it's quite interesting. I think this is what Wikipedia tells us habit is. It is a dominant or regular dispositional tendency, prevailing character or quality. Otherwise, in English, exactly what it is our habits combined to determine a large part of who we are. So multiple habits, the habits that make up you, the habits that make up me, are who we are, and who we are is our identity. And our identity is how other human beings perceive us and see us. Our identity is how we see reality. So it's really important for us to understand habit, but it's also important for us to understand what a habit is not. And this is, when I work with practitioners, this is really interesting, because without realizing it, we don't recognize sometimes the differences and the nuances. We have habits. We also have things that we do and behaviors that we carry out routinely. And then we have single actions. So these are the three things that collectively make up whatever you're designing in terms of change and transformation, whoever you are in terms of your own professional development. So let's have a look at it. Well, our habits are essentially the unconscious practices, the things that are happening inside our brain that we don't need to think about. So the reason for that is because our brain has created a habit and it's done it so that it can sit in there. It's a program running in the back of our head. We don't need to worry about it. It will just happen unconsciously. So we can forget about it. Brilliant. But in order for our brain to make a habit unconscious practice, it needs to be so deep so that it's there and it can just run on automatic pilot. So if you're doing something that is on automatic pilot that you don't need to think about it and it's repetitive and consistent, you've got a habit. Think about driving a car. How many times have you actually got to a destination and sat there behind the driving wheel and just thought to yourself, I can't remember how I even got here? That's habit. That's the power of habit. The power of habit is it's so unconscious. You forget about it. You can actually go through the habit and carry out the habit without even thinking about it. You know, which hand do you brush your teeth with? All of these kind of silly little things, but really, really important things when it comes to change and transformation. Unconscious, hard to break habits that are in the back of our brains that we don't need to think about. That's what a habit is. But a routine is not yet a habit. A routine is something that you might do on a consistent basis, something that you do routinely, repetitively, but it's still conscious to you. So you haven't done it enough times, or the brain hasn't seen reward in it enough to create a habit out of it. So we're still thinking about it. So it might be that every Friday morning you spend an hour doing some training, or going on to TED Talks and learning a TED Talk. You don't do that habitually. You have to probably put something in your diary to remind you, but you're doing it routinely. It's really important for us to recognize the difference between habit and routine. And the key thing is if you can make what you're doing routinely into a habit, then that's brilliant, because what that's doing is that's freeing up more of your conscious brain for all of those wonderful decisions and those wonderful ideas that you want to create. And the way to actually get a routine into the world of habit is to really understand what the reward is. If your brain can see that there's benefit in pulling it into the area of the brain where habit is created, then it's super, super important for you. And then, of course, what we've got is single one-off actions. Again, how many times have you been into a shopping, a clothing store, and you walked in and there's a rail right through, right in the front door, and it says, once it's gone, it's gone. Well, that's what single actions and single words and behaviors are. Once it's done, right? So these are the conscious thoughts. This is when we're ideating. This is when we're visualizing. These are the things that are super important for us. So all I'm saying here is just for us to be aware that there are habits, there are routines, and there are single actions, words, phrases, and behaviors. If we understand that we've got those three things, then anything that we're designing for an audience needs to be a balance of those three things. So quickly thinking about any project or program you're working on at the moment, have you got a balance in the design and delivery of where you want people to be taking single actions, where you want people to be doing things routinely but consciously, and where you perhaps want people to be doing things habitually. Really thinking about the balance of those three things in the design and the delivery of your change and transformation. There's science to habits. I'm not going to go into this too much. I am not a scientist myself, but there is science behind the power of habits. The place where the habits are built and where habits live is in the basal ganglia. And just to let you know, the basal ganglia is essentially our reptilian brain. So it's the survival brain. So, you know, again, it's the stuff that we need to just do without even thinking. Run away from that saber-toothed tiger. You want to be doing that without thinking. You don't want to sit there and just go, how big is that tiger? How far is that tiger away from me? You want instant, just habitual runaway. There's also the importance of understanding neural pathways, because a neural pathway is essentially when two neurons in our brain fire. And when they fire, they create a pathway from here to here. And as soon as it's fired, it's created a neural pathway. Now, you can have a thought and an idea, you're firing neural pathway, but then that's it. But if you do the same thing time and time again, you're firing the same two neurons. And the neural pathway becomes deeper and deeper and more ingrained. Have you walked along a path in a park or in a woodland area? The path that everybody walks becomes deeper, and you can see that path. That is what we want to do with habits. Habits are neural pathways that have been walked along, where our neurons have fired multiple times. The other thing that I kind of mentioned earlier on, or nuanced earlier on, is that the difference between a routine and a habit is that, you know, your brain recognizes something ripe for habit, neural pathways, when there is reward there, when it can see the benefit of it. And the benefit and the reward comes from dopamine. So if we can design reward in a routine for somebody, then the brain of that person might actually recognize it as something worth making into a habit. And bingo, you have got a shift from routine into habit. And the final little piece of science for today is neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the science of how we can change our brain, the malleability of our brain. We can change our thoughts, we can change our beliefs using habit work. So really important, neuroplasticity. And it's a relatively new science as well. It's a relatively new science that's only now starting to come into the world of business and work. It's only starting to enter into design thinking, product design and service design and change and transformation. But it's super powerful, because what it is now is we're not just backing up our work with research, we're also backing up our work now in change and transformation with science. That hasn't necessarily happened before in the past. Super exciting. The other thing for us to know as well, so again, in your brain, thinking about the project or the program of transformation or change that you're working on, it's really important for you to start to think about the characters and the types of habits that you might want to generate, that you might want to encourage and foster your users to build. There are physical or motor neurons, there are mental intellectual neurons, and there are character neurons. And essentially what that is action-driven habits, thought-driven habits, and emotional feeling-driven habits. So you can have a thought that is habitual, right? How many times do you think the same thing? When that happens, you always think, oh no, I can't do that. You know, we have feeling habits, thought habits, and action habits. Most people tend to put all of their effort into action-orientated physical habits. Nada, let's design around all three of these character types, because they all have value and worth. And what are some of the things that we can design around? Well, if you're designing a product or service that's about productivity, that, you know, is a growth or health or, you know, social connection, bringing humans together, community, or indeed self-care, think about what you really want to be driving forward in your product and service, and then start to think about what types of habits, what character habits you want to be using in the design of your project and program. Super important. The next thing that we want to understand is we want to understand, how do we create and form a habit? So if we do want our users to be habitually using our product and service, or habitually performing a a task around our product and service, we need to understand how to design that habit. And essentially, a habit is based on these 4 elements. It is based on a cue or a trigger. So something that just in the back of your brain goes, oh, time for a habit, as in saber-toothed tiger, oh, running in the opposite direction. So think about that. Think about when you put your key in the ignition of your car or press the button, what naturally, habitually happens. That's a cue for something to happen. And then you move, and then you move forward. So that's move forward through a craving, through a response, and through a reward. The reward is really important. The reward, as I mentioned earlier on, is what triggers your brain to understand the benefit of making it habitual. If there is no reward, your brain will only see it as something that needs to be done routinely, and it will keep it in your conscious brain. And you don't necessarily want that with some of the features and functions in your product and service. You want your users to see them as habitual. You want your users to build habits around features and functions that you're delivering. And the way to do that is make the reward clear. Design in reward, and their brains, not your brain, their brain will then ideally see the benefit of creating a habit out of it. So incredibly important. That is the formation of a habit, but there is also a journey. You don't just all of a sudden, with those lovely things in play, cue all the way through to reward. If you've got the habit loop in play, it still doesn't guarantee that the habit will actually be generated. You need to follow, in the design of change and transformation, we need to follow a journey. We need to follow a process. And the process very simply is, first and foremost, we need to establish it. We need to establish that habit. We need to become the type of person, or we need to deliver the feature and function that is giving that individual a change of identity. Then what we do is, once we've established it, we can activate it. Once we've activated it, which basically is adding a little bit of complexity to the early stage establishment, we can then embed it. And what does that embed mean? Give every single opportunity for that habit to create a very deep neural pathway. And then eventually that habit will be forgotten. That habit will be forgotten because it is a habit. It's now in the basal ganglia of the brain. And when we're working in the world of change and transformation, that piece there is very interesting, because sometimes people have got really good habits, but they don't know, because they're forgotten. They're in the basal ganglia in the back of the brain. So a lot of the time, what we have to do in change and transformation is to see where people have got good habits and help them to remember them again, and make them more external and bring them back into the consciousness a little bit so that they can start role modeling them. Very, very, very interesting. We, of course, have habits as a key element in our work, and we have an entire habit cycle methodology that we share with designers and with practitioners in change and transformation. So we build the habits through establish, activate, and embed that I've just mentioned to you, but you also need to make that habit stick. And making that habit stick is really about, supporting the reward, making the reward clear so that the brain of the user can see the benefit of it being a habit and not just a routine. But also what we're doing is we're helping to embed it through linking it and through integrating it with existing habits. We are all 45% habit. Every single one of us as human beings is 45% habit. So when we are building new habits for our users, we want to understand what their current habits are. If we can understand what they're already habitually doing, then what we can do is we can help the new habit and make it stick by linking it or integrating it with what they're already doing. We are all 45% habit. That's a really, really important thing for us to recognize. What I've done is I've added a wee little video in here, which is by James Clear. If you haven't gone to the work of James Clear, Atomic Habits, his book, please do, because it's brilliant. And the 2-minute rule that he talks about is exactly the same as our stage 1 in the habit cycle, establish. You have to establish the habit before you can actually really embed it, before you can activate it. And he talks very beautifully about an example of a guy wanting to go to the gym. And the first thing that you do is you try and understand the identity of somebody that goes to a gym. So you are a fit person. You are a person that cares about exercise. So the first thing that you do is a 2-minute rule is understand the identity of being somebody that is, you know, conscious about their exercise regime. And then the next thing you do is, in his example, get in the car and go to the gym. So he gives the example of this guy that wants to form a habit of going to the gym. And what he does is he gets in the car every day, he goes to the gym, he sits in the car for 2 minutes, and then he goes home. That's bonkers. It's like the runner, you know, a runner wants to run 10K. First things first, what's the identity? I don't want to run 10K. I want to become a runner. I want to become that. Finish that sentence. That gives you identity. Second thing that you want to do is you want to establish the habit. And what do? Well, instead of running to the end of the road and back, just put your shoes on. Just put your running shoes on for 2 minutes, walk around the house, take your running shoes off. Habitually establish your habit and make sure that you can finish the sentence. I am becoming what? Who am I becoming? So if you've got an identity statement for your users, and you also understand what that very first establish action is, then that's the 2-minute rule that James Clear talks about. Super, super, super important. And the video is there for you on playback. What I wanted to do now is I just wanted to introduce you to something that we have in our practice that you can bring into your projects and programs, you can bring into your organization. You can set up a mental gym for your project and program. You can set up a mental gym within your organization. And the mental gym essentially is all of the techniques that we need to pull together to create the new habits and to break the old ones. Now, we can never get rid of an old habit, but we can break it. We can break the links, but we can never take the path away. So that's why it's really important for us to establish and activate and embed new habits, because at any given moment, I don't know whether you've experienced this, but most people have. You start a new habit and you feel absolutely brilliant about the whole thing because you've got this new habit going. And then all of a sudden, after maybe 4 or 5 weeks, something from the outside world happens unexpectedly and you lose your momentum of the habit. And what happens? The old habit starts creeping back in. And we're seeing this a lot with hybrid working at the moment. We might have had, 12 months to 18 months in lockdown working from home, but some of the old habits of working within an office environment, or indeed, thinking about some of the habits around meeting and collaborating in a work environment, some of those are creeping back in because they were so deeply ingrained within us. And the new habits that were generated and created through lockdown have not been deep enough to become stronger than the old habits. So it's really important for us to follow that journey from establish to activate to embed before we forget. So mental gym is really important to us, and our quantum gym is all about growing our mind, because if we can grow our mind, then what we are doing is we are humanizing transformation, because everything that you're doing, if you've got a new health product going to market, if there's a new website being launched next week, whatever you're doing, what you are doing is you are trying to grow the mind of your users, because you are trying to provide difference to your users in terms of who they are, what they do, and how they do it. And 45% of what we do, 45% of who we are, is habit. So there's one thing to encourage action, but there's another thing to encourage the development and the formation of habits. It's so important. So in our quantum gym, what we do is we help you grow your mind. We help you grow the mind of your users by understanding what consciously they need to do, but also by helping form unconscious practice, which are those habits all the way through to forget. And maybe if we've got super users or early adopters, working with them to uncover some of those fantastic habits so that they can make them conscious again and externalize them. But most important on the right-hand side, motivation. Oh my goodness, I've talked about reward already today. I cannot tell you how important it is for us to dose up our brains with motivation. Recognize something that somebody is doing, incentivize people to do things, make sure we've got clarity of purpose. It's so important to reward and motivate. That is the bottle of water that you take to the gym to hydrate yourself with physical muscles. We need to motivate our mental muscles, conscious practice and unconscious practice. We need to motivate those, hydrate those with recognition, incentive, purpose, and reward. So where are they in your product and program? Where are they in the product or the change or transformation project or program that you're working on? Where is the motivation? Super, super important. You cannot have enough hydration. You really can't. And yet it's one of those things that we seem to kind of drop off at the end. We seem to, use it as a little bit of an afterthought, or, put it into the internal comms. What we ought to be doing is really centralizing the hydration part of growing people's minds into our products and services, growing people's minds into our change and transformation projects and programs. That's what we want to do. How are you growing the mind of your users into your new product and service, or into your change and transformation project or program? Interesting thought, huh? We also have what is called a habit canvas. If anybody would like to grab hold of this canvas, it's an editable canvas. It's also, we have an online version. More than happy to share this workbook with you, but certainly for you to work one-to-one or one-to-few, this is a fantastic worksheet to use. Just let me know in the chat, or indeed after the fact, DM me, and I will share that with you. It is also Wednesday, so we're live talking today about modern mindset theory and humanizing transformation. And just to let everybody know that we are now in launch phase of our new spring season, and we've changed our certification training as well, which I think is really, really exciting. What we've got now is we've got a one-day workshop, which is a professional certificate in foundation for modern mindset theory and humanizing transformation, for anyone there that wants to use some of these techniques in the design or the strategy of your change and transformation. So that's the one-day foundation workshop that will be really ideal for you. If you want to really bring humanizing transformation and modern mindset theory into your practice, then you might want to consider our Practitioner 2-day workshop. That also includes the requirement to deliver and to submit an assignment and practice hours. So that's really theory into delivery rather than theory into strategy for practice. And then the final one is our mentor certification. So if you're a business coach or mentor, or if you're starting to informally mentor and coach people in your team, or the leaders in your organization around change and transformation, that might be something that you want to look at. And this truly is where the modern mindset theory comes into play, because you yourself become a qualified mentor in the ability to design and deliver one-to-one and one-to-few modern mindset theory shift for leaders or for people that work in your organization. So those are our 3 certification programs for practitioners. But we also have transformation for non-transformational leaders, which is a new leadership program. Again, that is a one-day program that can be delivered either customized within your organization or on our public website, adapt2digital.com. So those are our key products and services out to market in terms of our training academy for the spring season. If you'd like to know more about those, just let me know. And of course, we'll be sending the recording of today to you later on today or tomorrow on email. Alongside that, yeah, it's one thing for me to give you a big, massive sell on our products and services. We're not a charity. I don't apologize for that. I am really, 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 devoted to our practitioner training academy. But I also wanted to share with you this. Everybody deserves the right to stop and think about who they are, the right to stop and think about their own professional journey. And that's why I try to keep my Thursday afternoons free and open for practitioners all over the world to just take that stop moment. And there is absolutely no ulterior motive here other than giving you an hour to think about who you are as a practitioner, who you are as a modern leader. And if you'd like to take advantage of that hour, then again, just let me know and I will put details into the email replay to you later on today. Everything that I've just talked about can be applied to you can be applied to the design of change and transformation, and can be applied to one to a few people. Yes, you can put it into the design of change and transformation en masse, but there's also something else that you need to be maybe considering when you're working on, if you've got a big user base that your project or program is delivering to. So if your target audience is pretty huge internally or externally, your users are, in the hundreds, if not the thousands, then what you might want to do is you might want to think about keystone habits. And a keystone habit is a single habit that is literally called a keystone, because if you've ever seen a stone archway, the stone right at the top, at the pinnacle of the archway, is called a keystone. And what it is that it's mathematically engineered to take that position in the archway to hold the weight of the archway. So it's called a keystone. So from that single keystone, everything else can stand. So the keystone habit is a single habit that just naturally generates and holds together many other habits. It's like a chain reaction, as you can see here. So if you can start to think about or work with your team to design 1, 2, or 3 keystone habits that will support your product and service, that will support whatever you are working on in change and transformation, oh boy, that is gold dust. A keystone habit is something really, really, really simple and yet powerful. An example of a keystone habit, just taking on board James Clear's examples from earlier on that I mentioned, and you will hear in that video, is this. If you start thinking about building a habit around exercise, whatever it is, it might be going to the gym, it might be running or yoga, it doesn't matter what it is, but that more often than not becomes a keystone habit to who you are in life generally. Because what happens over time is you start to become more conscious of what you eat. You might even, as you start losing a little bit of weight or change shape slightly, start thinking a little bit differently about what you wear. You might even, when you're in social occasions, social environments, might become a little bit more confident and speak louder, speak more informally, be more active and be more participatory in terms of social occasions. So that one habit that you were focusing on has suddenly created a chain reaction around your identity to create other positive habits. Now, if you, working with your design teams, can think of 1, 2, or 3 keystone habits to support whatever product or service you're taking to market, or whatever change and transformation project or program you're working on, oh boy, that's gold dust. And you only need 1, 2, or 3. That's the thing about keystone habits, because they take care of the chain reaction. They take care of the chain reaction. So just think about keystone habits, and that will be fantastic. Everybody on today's call, and I know that there's a huge amount of people on replay today. I've had so many apologies because of the Easter holidays, but no problem whatsoever. But the majority of us are practitioners. We live in the world of taking new products and services to market, or we live in the world of change and transformation within a business context. So we are ourselves practitioners, and therefore who we are and how we show up is really, really important. And for me, practitioners all themselves should practice these 3 keystone habits. The first keystone habit is journaling. And journaling can just be 1 or 2 or 3 words a day. It doesn't have to be pages. It doesn't have to be loads of content. But journaling is a really powerful keystone habit for raising consciousness and for working on who we are in terms of modern mindset, role models. Frame of reference is another keystone habit that we should all as practitioners really lean into. And when I talk about frame of reference, I'm talking about the 3 frames of reference. The 3 frames of reference that we use to create our identity. The forward frame, which is all about understanding what's happening in the future, trends and probability. The outward frame, what's happening around us in non-obvious places, in different geographies, in different sectors, with just different people in different jobs. and the inner frame of reference, which is really working on who we are, our confidence, working on our competence, working really on our own capability as a modern practitioner. So the frame of reference, we need the forward, we need the outward, and the inner frame of reference to guide our decision making. That frame of reference is arguably the most powerful decision making framework that you can have as a modern leader and practitioner. And the final keystone habit that some of you will already be aware of, and hopefully some of you will already be leaning into and committed to, is what we call the 1% daily power up. And you would have seen it on an earlier slide when I introduced the quantum gym, growing your mind. The daily power up is something that we work with all practitioners and all of our customers on. Every single one of our customers is exposed to the concept of 1% daily powering up. Everybody is. And you can use this concept as well in the design and delivery of your projects and programs. So just thinking about how can I introduce 1% of difference to my users who are familiar with this? And then once they become familiar with that 1%, how do I add another 1% to it and another 1%? Daily powering up by 1% in our own practice is a keystone habit. Using the 1% power up in the design and delivery of our projects and programs is also super powerful. So you can use the power up in two different ways. When it's a daily power up, it becomes a keystone habit in our own practice. And these are some things just to let you know a little bit more about them. Journaling. What do we mean when we're talking about journaling? Whether it's a single word or a full sheet of A4 paper, all we mean when we're talking about journaling is we either do it in the morning, which is when we focus on visualizing our day, being intentional about what is ahead of us, or we do it at the end of the day before we go to bed, or at the end of our working day when we're reflecting on what we've done. Then we have ideation, and ideation is literally when we have ideas that we write them down. It is so incredibly important for us to write down our ideas, because it is very difficult for our brain to keep hold of many ideas. So writing things down in the moments when we get the ideas, writing them down. How many times have you heard people say, when you have an idea in the middle of the night, write it down, have a notebook by your bed? And the final one is observational. Observational journaling is really important. And this is something that we encourage all of our practitioners to do. Notice other people. Start to become aware of what other people are saying and how they're saying it. Start to become aware of habits that people have, because people forget habits, which means that they are no longer conscious of the habits that they have. So we need to really exercise our observational journaling, really important. Frame of reference I've already mentioned. Daily power-ups, well, what can you do as a practitioner, as a modern leader? What can you do every single day to increase your effectiveness by 1%? And I guarantee, increase your effectiveness by 1% a day, 5% a week, 25% a month, 300% a year, that by using these 5 different types. Power up your day by 1% in productivity. Power up your day by 1% in just being kind to somebody else. Power up your day by thinking about your energy. So just try and plan your day around your energy. If your energy is highest and most powerful in the morning, why do you spend 20 minutes going through your emails when that's when you should be doing your most important work? Do your emails at the end of the day, and then just change your habits around energy. The penultimate daily power up is what we call experimental. And this is really important. If any of you are working on products and services to market, if any of you are working on, have an element of design in your work, then experimental daily power ups are super important for you, because this is when you're exercising that muscle of, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, it's just a scratch, I want to itch. And just doing that by 1% in your day, not every day, but if you can just familiarize yourself and normalize the concept of experimentation, just 1% in your day, that's super important. And the final daily power up option is what we call the environmental one. And that can be as simple as, I don't know, you go for a walk every day and sometimes you see rubbish on the pathway and you don't do anything about it. Well, today what you're going to do is you're going to pick up that rubbish and you're going to put it in the bin. You've just powered up your day from an environmental perspective. So think about sustainability, think about the environment, and just do one tiny thing to save the planet. And cumulatively for you, cumulatively for others, the daily power-ups are super, super, super powerful. We do also need to think about some other things as well. So some little techniques, if you want to apply the work of habits to a human system, to a change and transformation project or program that is about, masses of users, hundreds or thousands of users, then there's three things that I say are really, really important for you to think and consider. Sometimes not always that easy, but if you can put these three things into play with your team or in the delivery of the product and service, super important. Number one, the use of deliberate wording. How we communicate our own narrative, the narrative of your team, to the business, to the external world and the users. Think about positive, deliberate wording. Don't use fearful wording, use positive wording. It's not that you can't do something, it's that you can't do it yet. It's not yet, but it's yet and. Visualization, constant visualization. Even if your users are external members of the community, it doesn't matter. If we are able to get people to see themselves using your product and service, to imagine what feature and functions might look like in their life and adding benefit and value, get people to visualize. So design communication around constantly getting people to visualize themselves with your product and service, or at the end of the change with a vision of the change. Get them to imagine that, super important. And of course, the final one is uncovering flow paths. I mentioned the power of observation earlier on in journaling. The flow path is a technique that we have, and we have a worksheet. Again, if you would like to grab hold of that worksheet, just let me know, DM me, and I will send it to you following on from the recording of today and the slides. But the flow path is really important because every single one of us can see, sense, and hear actions, words, and behaviors of our users, of the users that our projects and programs are intended to support. But we cannot and do not know why they perform those behaviors, why they choose those words and those actions. And we can't assume. So we need to uncover why people behave and act and say what they do. And the only way to do that is for them to offer us their stories. So flow pathing is really where we apply appreciative inquiry for people to share what their beliefs are, what their values are, and what they're thinking, because we cannot see, we cannot look underneath the water of what the iceberg is underneath. It's only the human being themselves. So how, in the design and the delivery and the comms around your products and services, are you encouraging your users not to just give you feedback, but to share with you their thinking, their belief, and their values? Storify, and that's what's called the flow path. Super, super, super important. And this is an example of the flow path for you. We don't have time to go through it today because we are at time for this morning's webinar, but I've got it in here for you in the slides. And if you'd like a copy of that a worksheet, then absolutely just let me know, just DM me, just reply to the email that I send out later today or tomorrow with today's recording and the slides, and I will send the flow path worksheet to you and the habit canvas if you'd like that too. Banana skins for today, quickly, before we all go on and carry on with our days thinking about habits, hopefully, is this: making it too big at the start. 45% of who we are is habitual. Every single project and program that we're all working on should have a prioritization around habit work, encouraging our users to form habits. But the key thing is not making it too big. Remember, you've got to establish it before you activate it. And the final one is just alluding to the flow paths that I just introduced to you. We cannot, it is impossible, absolutely impossible for one human being to genuinely know what is inside the mind of another human being, what complexity around values and stories and beliefs and thinking that drives behavior, action and words. And it's really important for us not to make those assumptions and to challenge our colleagues and leaders around us not to make assumptions about why our users or people that are in our change and transformation projects and programs do, say, or behave in the way that they behave, say, or do. Really, really important. So there we go. Those are the banana skins for today. And that's the end of today's webinar. We're back in a fortnight's time to talk about another element of humanizing transformation. I'm really excited about the next one, actually. So we've got a great theme coming up in our next webinar, but I'm going to leave you with another quote. Donald Hebb: neurons that fire together wire together. The moment you have a thought, it's two neurons firing. Now, if you are able to repeat that thought, repeat that behavior, repeat that action enough times, they will create a wire, and that wire is the neural pathway. And you deepen that neural pathway and you've got habits. If you've got habits, you've got sustainable change and transformation. If you've got sustainable change and transformation, you have just humanized transformation, because the identity of your users is changing. Remember the gym? What we're trying to do in all of our work is we're trying to grow our users' minds in order for them to get to a better place, to create and evolve their identity. Thank you so much for listening to today. I am going to stick around for a few minutes, just in case there are any questions or any thoughts, but I am going to stop the recording button because we're well over time. We're 5 minutes over time. So I'm going to stop the record button. Wish everybody a great day or a great evening, and I will see you all in a fortnight's time to talk more about humanizing transformation. And until then, take care and keep safe.